Hey, everybody. How's it? Funny, had a little one beat false start there, and that followed me from Las Vegas because I did a show with our oldest, Kavan Tyree, in Las Vegas, and I actually did that. I did a false start to a song. It was a lot of fun. I'm thrilled to welcome yet another first-time offender, first-time guest here on the show, and I told Dame Evelyn Glennie that I've been dreaming of having her on since I started Drum Talk TV in 2013 in January. I think I came across your work within a year of the first year, and here you are. Thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate it, and excited and honored to have you on.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, not only is Evelyn deaf when she started to lose her hearing from the age of 8, and we'll get into that, but she has over 40 CDs, solo CDs, and composes for film, for television. She tours, she gives master classes. She's got an awesome TED Talk out there in charity. That's all on her website. There's a link to that in the post, but don't go there yet. Wait for after the interview, and then definitely go there, poke around, contribute if you can, learn about the mission that they have. But Evelyn, the first question I have for you is, I know that your first instruments were clarinet and piano. How old were you when you started that? And if it was before 8, did losing your hearing or beginning to lose your hearing at 8, did that contribute to your direction to start learning drums and percussion as well? Or was that not part of the equation?
Yeah, actually, no, it wasn't part of the equation, or certainly I wasn't aware that it was part of the equation. I mean, I was brought up on a farm in the northeast of Scotland, north of Aberdeen, and it was very normal for households to be exposed, not only in the house, but also at schools, with Scottish traditional music.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the musical experiences were done by ear. So it was very normal for me as a very, very young child to, be aware of advert music on the TV. And all the music making was in person. So we didn't listen to the radio. We didn't have record players or CD players. It was all kind of this sort of in-person experience. But I think the interesting thing about music at school was that it was almost like a triangle, because music wasn't just a separate subject. We did music, but in conjunction, we also did Scottish traditional dancing. And then we also did, in the Northeast, we'd speak a tongue called the Doric tongue or Buchan tongue. So we would recite poetry using that particular tongue. So, but everything was linked. So a lot of the traditional dance steps, you have the Scots snap, and that's so prevalent when we speak Doric. And of course, now with the snare drumming, the Scots snare drumming, it's all linked to the pipe playing and all the little grace notes and so on, and all the footwork for the traditional dance. So that was really interesting. And it was possible to do that when you went to a primary school that only had 37 pupils in the entire school. So it was a teeny weeny country school, only 2 teachers, small amount of pupils. So the entire school had a music lesson on a Friday, and that was that, really. And it was only when, I've just discovered I hadn't actually answered your question.
That's so okay. The backstory is great.
Starting the piano at the age of 8 was a good combination between playing by ear, but also learning to read music. So my parents felt, well, she likes to go on the piano, so why don't we encourage her to read music? And then she has that combination of improvising, playing by ear. And of course, my hearing was not deteriorating at such a big degree at that time. So I hearing and still playing. And then at the age of 10, I saw on television someone playing the clarinet, and I really liked the look of that instrument, and I really wanted to play that instrument. And so I started having lessons. It took a while for that to happen, but I was still at primary school. And So I went to a peripatetic teacher, and I was very ambitious on the clarinet. So I was really trying to get the whole range of what the clarinet could produce note-wise, pitch-wise.
Oh,
So the
wow.
high notes and the very low notes. And at that time, my hearing was deteriorating quite quickly. And my parents felt that perhaps there was so much strain in the head trying to get these high notes that they asked if I would stop playing the clarinet. I started
Oh,
with the piano, and I loved the piano. So I stopped the clarinet. And then when I went to secondary school at the age of 12, I saw the school orchestra play, and I saw the brass and the strings and the winds and the percussion. And the percussion somehow grabbed my interest, not because there were so many instruments. This was just basic instruments, two
mhm.
hand tuned timpani, a snare drum, cymbal player, bass drum player. But it was enough to fuel the interest of a 12-year-old. And every player was playing something different. And I really liked that. Some instruments were small, some were big. And you notice the whole body exerting itself in the instrument.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a very natural position to be giving sound. Unlike playing a violin, if you take the violin away, what else do you do in life that
Yeah,
has
right.
what else
Yeah,
do you do in life that has this position or
right,
this kind of position,
right.
you know?
Whereas
And
with drums and percussion, we can play ourselves or
absolutely,
the table.
absolutely, and everything is really sort of balanced and just that whole body kind of involvement. So of course, a lot of people wanted to play percussion, and a lot of people put their name down in the hope that they could learn percussion. And by this time, I was wearing hearing aids, and I was very dependent on the hearing aids. And but what it did for music was that it made everything very, very loud, very messy, very
Yeah,
muddy, and there's no distinction. And that had a massive effect on my sense of touch. So I just felt that everything needed to be heard through the ear. So of course I was just playing harder and harder and harder to try and hear it and to hear it more clearly. But
yeah,
of course, the more you did that, the more sound you actually receive. And I think this is the kind of, we imagine that if you're deaf, you can't hear, you
yeah,
know. And yes, there's of course there are frequencies you can't pick up, but a lot of it is almost too much sound, and then you don't know what where that sound is coming from, the direction of it, and it really affects the balance and that sense of touch.
yeah.
So my teacher, once I did start learning at the age of 12, my teacher didn't see us as percussion players at all. He saw us as sound creators.
Oh, nice.
We all do, whether you play the trombone, the clarinet, the accordion, percussion, it doesn't matter. We create sound. And so that was the first thing that was very, very interesting to me. And in that first lesson, he said to me, Evelyn, please create the feel of a tractor. And I thought, okay, well, actually, how interesting. My dad has just bought a brand new tractor. So we had the old rickety one without a cab, and we had this brand new one with a cab. So the old rickety one with, just a kind of rickety engine-y
An ostinato.
feel. Exactly. So I created the feel, obviously not the sound, the feel of this old tractor on the stereo. So my hands just kind of rumbled on the drum. And then I thought, well, my brand new tractor, or my dad's brand new tractor, was like velvet. The engine you hardly noticed. So this was the feel of the new tractor. And then I thought, okay, I'll give the feel of another tractor. And that's a tractor with the engine off.
Right.
So,
Perfect. Tapped it.
that's the tractor. And it went on. So there's a whole orchestra of tractors. Now, if my teacher said, Evelyn, please create the sound of a tractor, then you might have given a generic sound of brrr or something like that and gone brrr on the drum. But the feel, that is coming from inside of you externally. A sound, you're trying to think of what the sound is and trying to get it into your system. So there's a huge difference in thought process. So that sound creator, from the story of that individual, was really important. So he wasn't saying, this is the sound of a tractor, please create that. He was saying, what is the feel of a tractor to you? And the difference between creating the feeling as opposed to the sound, the body has to slow down and think of the story of that feeling. So there's a very big difference there.
That's interesting.
The sound creator, and then the musicianship, as you expand your musicianship, you understand about the phrasing and this and that. So you build this musical story. And then you need your ingredients to do that, in which case it can be the snare drum or a cymbal or a woodblock or a marimba or whatever it is.
Right.
So but often we learn something by saying you're a percussionist, you're a violinist, and then you become that instrumentalist as opposed to the sound creator. So it really flipped things on the head, which really, really helped me think about my own experiences in listening to sound. Because when I took the hearing aids off, yes, there was far less sound through the ear, but much more sound coming through the body. So it's, sometimes when you put your hand on top of a resonator and you strike like a marimba bar or something, no matter how hard you strike, it's almost like a choked sound, and it doesn't give you any more color, sound color.
Right.
As soon as you take your hand away from the resonator and strike it, it just blooms like a flower. And it's just that's what happens with sound. The sound just seeps through your body, and you really pay attention to that resonance, the whole journey of the sound, rather than the impact and then react to that. So you listen to the impact, that journey, then the acoustic, the space, everything around you, and then you decide how you want to connect the next note.
Gosh, there's so much beautiful gold in there. One of the things that I picked up on, a couple of things, I want to go back to the clarinet for a moment. You mentioned that the clarinet grabbed you, and you mentioned the look of the clarinet. Musically, what was it that grabbed you about the clarinet? Was it more symphonic and concert type music, or was it Dixieland? Was it jazz? Was it some of the other traditional Scottish music, which, by the way, makes sense the way it was placed in early academia, being that Scottish music has such cultural roots tied to the tradition. So all of that made sense. But what kind of music did you play or listen to related to the clarinet?
Nothing at all. It
Oh,
was
interesting.
literally the look of it. I loved the black kind of sleekness of it, and all the
Yeah.
silver keys,
Nice.
and the fact that you are connected to it, with your mouth. It just sort of looked quite classy, because I wasn't listening to music. So in a way, less was more.
Yeah,
I just
that's
wasn't
interesting.
I wasn't growing up with music in that way. Music was when we had relatives over and somebody would, inevitably play the fiddle or play
Yeah.
the accordion or sing or recite or something. So music wasn't dealt with in that kind of way at all. My parents weren't musical, but they appreciated the traditional music. So there was none of this categorization of music, because I didn't know about that at all. It was literally seeing it. And I think it was in an orchestra on TV, as part of the proms in London or something. And I just saw the instrument. I thought, wow, that looks really nice. I'd love to play that. So that was it. So no other reason.
Yeah, very interesting. It enabled you to take a completely objective, unpredisposed approach to be artistic with it because you had no other context with the instrument, really, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was the whole thing about learning percussion, because, this is going back to the 70s, of course. We didn't have people come into the school giving master classes and workshops. We weren't seeing videos of people,
No.
talking about various aspects of drumming or percussion or whatever. That just obviously didn't happen in those days,
Yeah.
not in a school, in the northeast of Scotland. And so we didn't, well, the only music shop in the nearest city, which was Aberdeen, was a shop that mainly sold pianos. And so to find any kind of percussion repertoire was non-existent.
Oh,
So we
wow.
took piano repertoire, we took flute repertoire, violin, anything at all we could find, and adapt it to the percussion instruments. So, for example, I remember a snare drum lesson, and in front of me was a Bach prelude fugue or something like that,
Mhm.
and or a partita or something, a violin partita, I can't remember. And my teacher would say, Evelyn, just have a look at the first phrase or something. And he would say, what key is that piece in? So I'd look at the key, and it might have been in G minor or E minor or A major or whatever. And he would say, what does that key feel like to you? So, okay, G minor was like a cheeky minor key, not a threatening minor,
Yeah.
It was something that was trying to be minor, trying to be dangerous, but not really. It wasn't like a dark night minor. And so that's what it felt like. And then he would say, right, play this first phrase on the snare drum. Well, of course, you had to look at the music and get all of these phrases. So this was a form of sight reading. So
Mhm.
many different elements were being popped into this kind of lesson without you really realizing it. And then you would play this on the snare drum. And what was happening was that, of course, you were placing the sticks in absurd ways and holding them in all different ways, getting the body in there, getting it up here, back here. And it was just a wonderful way to kind of create that bridge between what you feel, allowing the snare drum to become like an extension of your limbs,
Mhm.
getting that whole body behind that drum, in that drum, under that drum, on that drum, with that drum,
Yeah.
by that drum, whatever it was, without rules getting in getting in the way initially. So he could have started off by saying, Evelyn, this is how you hold your sticks, whichever way you want. Or, Evelyn, please make sure there's this distance between your tummy and the snare drum. Or please make
Right.
sure your arms are at a more or less 90 degree. Please make sure your sticks are more or less in a V shape. To play loud, play in this part. To play soft, play in this part, and so on and so forth. Please make sure your sticks come up very evenly.
All
Trying
the stuff that doesn't really matter.
Absolutely. And you would strike that drum and no doubt look at the teacher and think, was that okay? Was that right? Was it wrong?
Right.
Whereas this way, you're creating so many elements of being the musician and the sound creator without worrying about being the percussionist. And so finding this balance between introducing the technique of things to that absolute individual, unique identity of who is in front of you, i.e., your pupil or your student or whoever it may be,
Right.
is so crucial because we're all unique, and
Yeah.
yeah. And that was a great way for me. It just resonated with me as far as feeling right in how I wanted to discover music. This
Yeah.
balance between freedom, obviously learning to read music, um, the balance between taking an instruction and trying to deliver that, and the balance between having faith in your own kind of feeling and your own thoughts and your own ways, I think is really, really important. And I think it's a major thing for the longevity of anybody's career.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all that. And before I show a couple clips and we talk about them, you mentioned I can relate to the hearing aid issue and it just not working if you're going to play music. Because I wear hearing aids now. My wife for
Okay.
3 years was saying, you got to get hearing aids. I'm tired of yelling at you and you saying what. It just changed my life and the life of those around me. But I don't wear them when I drive. The road noise is just crushing. I don't wear them when I'm in a social situation or at a restaurant. Everything's too loud. I wear them when I'm doing this, interviews or in meetings or so that I can hear people, but I certainly could never wear them playing any of my many hand drums or my drum set or anything. That would just be crazy. So my question is, and I'm not sure why I need hearing aids. I don't know if it was either the 54 years of playing drums so far or being married with 11 kids and 19 grandkids. I think it's that. But my question is, you mentioned you were about 12 at that age. At what point did you not even use hearing aids anymore because your hearing had deteriorated that much, and discover that if you played barefoot, the music you'd hear through your body and the vibrations? And with that musical exhibition you just showed, how did you learn dynamics? Was it the same way through the vibrational experience?
Yeah, well, a lot of things in there, basically. I mean, the fact of with dynamics, something like that is the awareness of touch.
Yeah.
Literally touch, and being absolutely, in tune with how that hand works and how the instrument works with the acoustics and what's in your mind. So, a, a, a something that is played quietly in an outdoor venue, is going to be a very different quiet than if you're playing in a studio, or if you're playing in a certain concert hall.
Right.
Um, it's constant awareness and being in that moment regarding dynamics, and it's knowing that you can create any kind of sound, any extreme of sound that your body will give. That's our job as a musician, being able to sort of tap into those real extremes as and when we need to. So, for example, are if you whisper at a Super Bowl match game or whatever,
Yeah.
it's going to be totally, ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the piano level might be quite a loud shout,
Right.
but it's still it might be like that. But if you do that same dynamic in a library or something, it's going to be completely odd. So really, it's the awareness of the space that you're in and really honing in on that sense of touch. I think for me, I started getting or wearing the hearing aids much, much less. I mean, I can't give you an exact date, but it's round about the age of 16, 17, when
Mhm.
I decided to go in for music full time. And I was then exposed to many more percussion instruments than at school. And many more different musical situations. And I really discovered that I just needed to hone this body in much, much more than being distracted by what was coming through here. So I took them off a lot more when I became a full-time student at the age of 16.
Mhm.
And I think that was possibly the time when I began to realize that actually, the feet are crucial. Obviously I play sometimes with my shoes on, because if I'm playing on a carpet, I you're not going to get a lot.
Right.
That, or if you're playing in a cathedral where it's stone flooring, you're not going to get a lot from that. And also the temperature of the floor that you're on
Right.
will play a part too. So of course, sometimes I play with shoes, sometimes I play with just stockings, sometimes it's just bare feet. But I think the thing about not playing with shoes is that it's that balance again with the body. You feel absolutely grounded, and the feet are incredibly sensitive. It's just almost
Yeah.
like an elephant, and you'll be surprised how much you manipulate your feet in different ways, and how you angle them. And again, it's just this good sort of postural balance. If that foot is on a heel and it's in that direction, you're immediately slightly forward.
Yeah.
You're immediately thinking about this sort of thing and this kind of thing. Whereas without shoes, you've got more of a trampoline type of effect.
Yeah. Very interesting. I showed up once for an audition. It was kind of a pop rock kind of band, but my arm was in a full cast like this. And they thought I was crazy for showing up with, right-handed drummer with a broken wrist in a full cast. I got the job, by the way. They thought I was crazy. What kind of pushback or weird negativity, if any, or criticism did you get wanting to become a full-time music student, let alone a professional musician, when you're deaf? How did that ever get in the way? Was that part of the inspiration to overcome and motivate, or was it just accepted?
Well, I had an extremely supportive school when I was at secondary school, from the age of 12 until 16,
Mhm.
because it was an inclusive school. It was an integrated school. And so it really did capture all of the kids in that area. So the school was it was a normal comprehensive school, but with a slight difference in that it was kitted out with wheelchair ramps, for example. So if any kid in the area, was in a wheelchair, they could access the school. Or the color scheme on the corridor walls and the classroom walls were such that they were thought about for sight impaired kids.
Mm,
Uh,
nice.
I had and myself and another boy had a visiting peripatetic teacher for the deaf who came in once a week to make sure that we were, all up to speed with everything. We fundraised for a phonic ear so that we could wear this device, and that would allow the teacher to walk around the classroom without always having to be at the front because of us. And it was a very supportive school. So if you were deaf, you belonged to the music department. If you had one leg, you belonged to the sporting department. If you were
Wow,
blind,
this is way ahead of its time for that time. I'm a
it
little bit older than you, but we basically went to school at the same time, and that's so progressive. Was that common in Scotland and throughout the UK and Europe for that matter? Because it took them till maybe last year to get that act together here in the US. I mean, that's
yeah.
really impressive. Was that
It,
common back then?
No, it wasn't common at all. This
Okay.
was one of a kind that thankfully other schools saw as an example. And so it kind of had a wonderful effect, but it was one of the first schools of its kind. And basically, the ethos was that every child has a story to tell. And so every child, belongs basically.
Yeah.
So in that school, you have a great plumber, you have a great electrician, you have a great doctor, you have a great mom, a dad, you have a great baker, you have a great musician, a sports person, whatever. It's all in that school, and that's not dependent on whether somebody can hear or not hear, or somebody has one leg or no legs or whatever. It doesn't matter. So it was
Interesting.
it was a very, very positive uh, outlook. So for me, when I wanted to become or just at least study music full time, the only kind of advice really they gave was that, well, why don't you stay on school for another year and you'll be a year older? And that was more the age that people would audition for. But I was just ready to go, ready to leave. And that's what I did. The real kind of little road bump, as it were, came about in the auditioning process of the Royal Academy of Music, because of course there you've got an establishment where in those days, and it's very different now, but in those days most of the students went on to be orchestral players,
Oh,
or teachers and so on. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a solo percussionist. That was tattooed on my forehead. So really, when that was mentioned, they thought I'd landed from Mars. And so not only this, youngster who had a hearing impairment, but also wanted to be a solo percussionist. So both of those things were a problem. The hearing, because they didn't feel an orchestra would accept a deaf musician. And I said, well, I don't want to be in an orchestra, so there's no problem here. We're creating something that doesn't exist.
right.
And I want to be a solo percussionist. And they, well, who's going to listen to a 2-hour percussion recital? And I said, well, you may not, but there will be somebody who will. And so bit by bit, we had to get over this. But the point was that it changed how the audition process happened. So if that person is of the standard to get in, and I was off that standard, and they recognized I was off that standard, they need to get in. And you cannot say, well, but somebody else won't accept them because of this, this, and this. You
Right.
can't start predicting like that. You have to just take the circumstances as it is. So if that person is good enough to get in, and there's space for them to get in, then
Mhm.
you get in. And so it basically changed the system throughout the UK in that felt that, and thankfully that, right, no matter what the situation is with a person, that if they're off that standard, we must try to get them in. And then whatever else happens after that, well, we deal with that as it happens, because 3 years, it doesn't sound a long time, not when you're our age, but actually
Yeah.
back, it,
When you're young, yeah.
it's quite a long time, and things can change. So that was it, basically. It just meant that they then were able to open up to any other hearing impaired person who wanted to audition, and not base it on the fact that, oh, I don't think so because of X, Y, and Z. If they're not good enough, then they don't get in. If they're good enough, they get in.
What a great standard. I want to show everybody an excerpt of a video of yours, the first of two that we'll show, and then we'll talk about music some more and instruments. Folks, check this out. 1 minute and 2 seconds of Dame Evelyn Glennie playing some wonderful percussion instruments. Check this out. We'll be right back. So wonderful and melodic. I love melodic drumming. Me personally, on my big progressive kit, I call it that because I play a lot of progressive music on it. I don't have any bottom heads, and it's been that way since 1983, I believe. I love when drums just breathe and ring out like a beautiful violin, cello, acoustic guitar. I believe that's how they were made. This is not a criticism to anybody out there, but I personally can't not get my head around putting stuff on the drums to mute them and make them all sound the same. So I love that there's so many layers and textures there based on the fact that there's so many different instruments allowed to sound like how they were made, which is just wonderful. Do you excuse me, do you experiment with different combinations and setups of the many, many different percussion instruments that you play?
Yes, that definitely is the case. And a lot of that is because of the repertoire sometimes that I have to play. So there are very different setups, different combinations of instruments. So, having commissioned well over 200 solo percussion pieces, you've had some very interesting combinations for sure. And that I find really fascinating. If I'm improvising, then I'd really quite like to experiment having low sounds in the right as well as the left, or the right side or left side, or different things that sort of are quite surprising.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the setups I sometimes use, I think of as a keyboard. So sometimes I have it, high on the right going down to low on the left, and then that includes the kick bass drum as well. So I don't think of the body whereby what I'm right-handed or left-handed. It's what musically works in that phrase.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in having like a drum kit where you've got a right-handed drum kit and a left-handed drum kit, side by side, so that you can really begin to mix things up. And I think that's happening a lot more
It is.
with players. It's almost sometimes difficult to define what a drum kit is now, or a drum set.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
There's a lot more players that are playing open-handed as well for that reason,
Absolutely.
I believe. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've seen it, I think, with the explosion of cymbals and where they're placed and so on, and the different combinations. And now, extra snare drums, and then maybe an extra hi-hat. And then, oh, now
Yeah.
floor tom is up there, and as well as down here. And
Yeah.
really interesting. I just find that very fascinating. So I enjoy that type of thing.
I've always said that, and you're reminding me of this. I've always said that one of the most interesting things about being a drummer or a percussionist is that it truly is the only instrument that can be 100% personalized for the player. A clarinet is always going to have the valves in the same place. You're always going to blow into it in the same place, no matter whose clarinet you borrow. Trumpet, trombone, basically guitar, bass, piano, all of those. But drum sets or percussion setups, anything goes basically, as long as you can make it sound good. But as far as the setup, we have such a versatile palette that really in many ways has no rules, which I find fascinating and allows us to explore musically a lot more and learn about our instrument and the different sounds. So
Absolutely.
that's something I just love about being a drummer.
I totally agree. And I remember recently asking a saxophone player, what do you imagine the saxophone to be in 100 years' time? How do you imagine it to be? What do you imagine it to feel like? And how would you imagine negotiating a saxophone in
Let
100
let me
years'
guess. Did they say the same but more expensive?
time? Oh dear, probably. Well, funnily enough, they actually said, "Oh, I haven't really thought about that before." But
Right.
as you say, this is something that we percussion players, think about almost on a daily basis.
Yeah,
Uh, it's what is the Stradivarius drum kit? What is that
right.
Steinway, setup? It's whatever you want it to be, and I think that's why we can be so enthralled and influenced by uh, musicians from all over the world, people that we see playing on the streets or in a
Yeah,
corner or in a small club or in a concert hall or in wherever it may be. Everybody is relevant. Every situation is like almost like a wow experience because of what they might have available to them. Um,
yeah,
we just see this in so many territories throughout the world that a matchbox can be as intriguing as the latest snare drum, and
yeah,
and I love that, where I think it's a great educational tool for young people as well, and it just allows their imagination to go, wow, actually, you know what, I've got this at home, I think I can do something with this. Or,
yeah.
"Ooh, I don't know how many I think I've got about 200 homemade shakers of one sort or another. I mean, I'm just having my bathroom done at the moment at home. And I'm saying to the plumber, do not throw out that pipe. Do not throw out that radiator. I'll use it, please, yes, I'll have that. Thank you."
Yeah, that's
He said, "I thought
hilarious.
you wanted a new bathroom." And I said, well, I do, but I still want to keep the old one.
That's so funny. Yeah, you can make a clarinet out of the pipe. Um, I'm going to show another excerpt and then have a musical instrument question for you. Here you go, everybody, with another performance for a minute and a half of Dame Evelyn Glennie. Stand by, and we'll be back. Check this out. I'm so inspired to just clear my day and just go play. But I happen to know there's at least a couple people on our team that are watching this, and I probably shouldn't do that. I'll get to questions and comments in a moment, folks, and I'll relay them to Evelyn. So here's my question. What this is like picking children, and I tell them all they're my favorite. But what is your favorite percussion instrument?
Well, I try and keep my life simple, and whichever instrument is in front of me at the time, that's my favorite. Really.
Right now it's this, right?
Ooh, ooh,
The keyboard.
absolutely. I think that, it was my choice to be a percussion player, a multi-percussion player, and therefore that means that you involve yourself with different instruments. And I don't really want to psychologically get into a state whereby I like this one less or more, or this one
Yeah.
less, and whatever. So truly, whichever thing is in front of me, that's what I focus on, and that's what you commit to. And so if it's a marimba, it's a marimba. If it's a snare drum, it's a snare drum. If it's a drum kit, it's a drum kit. If it's a
Or a
timpani,
sync pipe taped at both ends with seeds inside to shake.
absolutely anything at all, anything at all. If it's body percussion, it's body percussion. And that also applies to pieces of music. So whichever piece is in front of you, that's your favorite piece. Because our job really, when we're
Yeah.
playing another composition, is to create the story of what you feel that piece is, rather than judging whether it's a good or bad piece of music.
Yeah, absolutely. That
And very
makes sense.
often pieces need time. They need more than one performance, and
Yeah.
it's really easy for us to be judgmental. But we've just got to give things a chance. It's like having a first date with somebody. You don't suddenly know everything about that person. You need another meeting, another chance, another situation. And it's the same with music.
Yeah.
So that's how I think psychologically. And it really helps you, kind of devote and use and focus your time on that situation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've got this baggage on your shoulders. Well, I don't really like this piece, or, oh, not my favorite instrument, but I've got to do it. And that's
Right.
where you want to
It
be.
hits a hindrance. But I do have one exception for you that I'll submit. The one exception is the first date that my wife and I went on, which was a blind date, by the way, the only one I had ever been on. She interrogated me for 3 hours. I couldn't even get a word in. So I think she pretty much knew everything about me from that first date. But that's another story. So let me ask it this way, and then we'll go to questions and comments. What's been an instrument, if you can pick one, that has been the most challenging to master as best you can as far as a percussion instrument? Have there been any that stand out as like, wow, this took a lot more? I've heard tabla, which I don't play, Dangam, which I've played a couple times, are two of the most difficult percussion instruments to master, but it could be different for everybody. Was there one for you that took a lot more energy and focus and to learn the technique of it and get it to do what you wanted it to do from learning how to play it?
Well, I think all the instruments, have so many elements that you're constantly trying to improve, and I think as you get older, as well as the years go by, your physical relationship with that instrument changes, and also your circumstances as regards to the support you have in learning the instruments. I mean, when I started percussion, there was no internet. So, you were obviously reliant on your teacher and your good self in, just listening to yourself and
Yeah.
what the things feel like. So, you were an important teacher, to your own progress and your own development. But also at that age, there's a real sense of freedom as well. And of course, music is integrated with your other school subjects. So, the balance of how things are is very different than when you're a professional musician, where there are commitments. You have to learn something for a particular day and time, and you're expected to be of a certain level. And it's a whole different psychological ball game. And the thing I found, so I'm kind of answering your question in a roundabout way, but
Mhm, that's okay.
during the pandemic, I, the concerts had all finished. I was here. I had a regular day, day after day after day after day. Whereas before that, I don't think I had a regular day since school days. So this was amazing. And I literally went through every single instrument in this room, put it on a spreadsheet, put the whole story of that instrument on a spreadsheet, the name of it, the alternate names, the condition, where it was obtained, how much I may have paid for it, if I could remember, where it was bought from, the dimensions, the weight, you name it, everything about that instrument, every single instrument, from a tiny shaker, clave, triangle, tambourine, to a bigger drum, to the gamelan, to whatever. And what I did was that I basically picked up, I remember going right to the back shelf and picked up this first snare drum at the very end of the shelf.
Mhm.
I literally reacquainted myself with that drum. And I was able to do this with all of the instruments. And I got to the tabla bit and I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to learn tabla, but I've never had time and one thing or another, or consistency and just all sorts of things. And obviously, I know that, tabla is extremely challenging. I'm not Indian, so the whole language thing is something that you'd have to be taught from
Right.
a non-Indian point of view, as many of us are. But, and also this was a kind of period where suddenly you were quite dependent on the internet.
Yeah.
And I think my relationship with the internet was such that, well, I'm kind of at a level whereby I know when something seems to be quite genuine and where something is maybe not quite right, or of the standard that you think, And again, that's listening to yourself. And so during the whole pandemic, I was very much into tabla. And obviously, I'm very basic at the tabla, but just enough to make it handy for me to include in certain musical settings. And I think that's what's important, is that you've got to think, right, obviously you can't cover the whole spectrum of percussion, you can't cover every single, go to every single land, on the planet and learn, every aspect of percussion. So you've got to be realistic and think,
Yeah.
how can I best use and how do I want to use this in the musical settings that I think could be quite useful? So it's finding that balance between the business side of things and making your time work business wise, and also curious, through your own sense of curiosity and what you just want to do. So the great thing about having that amount of time was that I could learn things or re-explore things without thinking I have to reach a particular standard.
Right.
I don't have to get to a particular level for 7:30 on the 27th September 2025.
Yeah.
This was entirely my own kind of growth, as it
Yeah,
were.
at your own pace, which is important. Yeah, it takes that pressure off. Thanks for answering that. I'm gonna go to questions and comments real quick. We got a few minutes left. Let's see. Oh, okay, I gotta change glasses for this. Um, uh, oh, Davy Demon and the Hellraisers says, "Genius talk. Thank you, Evelyn and Dan. Thank you, Danielle Major, someone on our wonderful team who's also a drummer." Danielle is saying, "My mom played clarinet. I played oboe. She's also a piano player and a drummer," and says she felt the same way when she saw the oboe. It just looked cool and was unique. And I personally love the sound of the oboe and the bassoon. My two favorite reed instruments, actually. Davey also says he'll be back to watch. And let me go down to, Eden Behar from Israel says, "So interesting. Shalom to both of you. Thank you. Shalom, Eden. We'll be having you on soon." He does a Cirque show, Cirque du Soleil. And Danielle reminds us that drums are ancient and the main tool that allows melodies to bond with the rhythm. And Danielle has a question. She says, "Do you have any children?" I'm pretty sure she's referring to you. She knows my story. Do you have, excuse me, do you have any children? And if you do, how do you approach teaching them music? My daughter is in percussion in band and doing a great job. I'm a self taught drummer. Do you have any advice on how to encourage and teach children without learning from your own bias, as in this is how you do it. Did that make sense, Evelyn?
I think so. I don't have children myself,
I
and
have extra. Do you want children? Oh, just kidding.
very happy. But,
Okay.
so, really, no, but I think, the wonderful thing is, in a way, the world is like an orchestra. It's just like a huge orchestra. And when you think about asking a child, oh, what did you experience when you walked or cycled, or if you were driven into school or whatever, what did you notice
Right.
coming in? And if they said, oh, well, it was really cloudy outside, or oh, it's really freezing, or it's very windy, or I saw something on the road today, and then try to take that comment and make it into a musical experience. So what did you feel? Whoa, well, I was surprised. So how many surprising sounds can we find in this room today?
Right.
You know, have like a Super Bowl ready, just a homemade
Yeah.
Super Bowl, and just find all of the surprising sounds around in that room today,
Yeah.
and make it an exploration. Or if it's possible to just go outside and find 10 sounds that you hadn't considered that you might find in that bit of grassy area or wooded
Yeah.
area or something.
The
You know,
rustle of the tree leaves, that's a percussion instrument. I got frustrated with technology once and threw a computer monitor. That made a great sound. It got stuck in the drywall. It was one of the cubicle, but you never know. But that's great advice.
I think
Um,
it is interesting because it then taps into the whole Foley artistry,
right. Oh,
being
yes.
really aware, it's the footsteps and the weight of footsteps and what is that person wearing, and even if you don't hear something, but you're being aware of movement and pace and body posture. And so you might just go people watching and say, oh, look at that person watch. So are they quite militaristic? So let's see if we can replicate this on a djembe or something,
Yeah.
oh, that person had a bit of a swagger. So how can we represent that through the movement on the djembe? Or
Yeah.
that one was quite stooped over and kind of forward. So how can we replicate that on a djembe? What are we feeling? What's the difference in sound? What's the difference in the feel of the rhythm? Is
Yeah.
it forward? Is it on? Is it behind? And suddenly you're talking about all aspects or different aspects of music making rather
Yeah.
than play this rhythm.
Yeah. This reminded me before I ask the last question, this reminded me that we have laminate floors and hardwood floors in almost every room of the house. Without looking, I can hear which dog is prancing by because of their gait and the sound of their nails. All three of them have a different walk and whatnot. It's funny. Without even looking, I know who it is. It's the same thing. And that's part of really being in tune, no pun intended, and being aware. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for the comments and the questions, everybody. My last question, this is called the Evelyn Glennie Fun Fact segment. So the
Oh.
question is, give us a different peek behind your curtain, if you don't mind, when you're not creating music, when you're not writing music, when you're not performing music. What do you like to do that's completely removed from music? Do you collect something? Do you read? Do you watch certain kinds of, what do you like to do when you're not doing music?
Yes. Oh, I like to metal detect.
Oh, really?
I like metal detecting, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to do, whether by yourself or with other people, whether it's raining or whether it's really warm. It's an all season activity,
Yeah.
and so that's really interesting, and it gets you outside. It gets you, into nature. It doesn't matter if you don't find anything or you find whatever.
Plus, you
It,
got the pattern of the Geiger counter to listen to, which is ever changing. What's the most fascinating thing to you that you ever found? The most surprising thing to you?
Oh, not a lot, really. Nothing hugely surprising, other than perhaps bits of kind of quite old farming machinery.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
neat.
So I live in East Anglia, in Cambridgeshire, in the UK, which is quite flat,
Mhm.
and so there's a lot of there have been a lot of serious fines in this area, you know.
Nice.
But of course, you have to get permission and all of that. You can't just go wading onto people's land. But
Right.
it's quite fascinating. A lot of horseshoes, all sorts of things,
That's
really.
great.
But yeah, that's interesting. I also like to go to antique fairs and
Oh, so do
things.
we.
So that's a place, you know, or a situation whereby you can find some interesting percussion instruments, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to bells and things.
Yeah.
So a lot of the old horse bells that are on big leather straps
Oh,
can be found
nice.
in those places.
Yeah.
But yes, I like reading. I just like being at home and um, uh, yeah, just I don't do anything musically in my free time other than
That's
collect
good.
instruments. I don't involve myself with music. I don't want overload.
Yeah.
So having that balance is really important.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. We really appreciate it. Stay on the line with me for just a moment after we say goodbye to the audience. And audience, it's right there in the post wherever you're seeing this. You'll be able to click and go straight to Evelyn's website, learn all about her charity, all the other work she does. And thanks for following Drum Talk TV. Check out our membership site, Drum Talk TV Brilliance. And Evelyn, I would love to have you on again. We'll get together on that. And folks, thank you so much. We will see you soon, sooner than you think, and maybe even sooner than you want. I don't know. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.